In 793 AD, a fleet of longships appeared without warning, off the coast of the holy island of Lindisfarne in northeast England, and destroyed one of the most important monasteries in the Christian world in a single morning. The attack was so fast, so violent, and so completely unexpected that the scholars who wrote about it afterwards described it as the wrath of God. It was not the wrath of God. It was the Great Heathen Army, the most feared raiders in the medieval world. And for the next 300 years, they did the same thing to every coastline. In Europe, they sacked Paris, they raided the Mediterranean, they settled Iceland, Greenland, and reached North America 500 years before Columbus. They conquered half of England and established a Viking kingdom at York that lasted for decades. Every coastal civilization in Europe spent 300 years terrified of the same thing, the sight of a dragon prow breaking the horizon at dawn. Now it is 865 AD, and the Great Heathen Army, the largest Viking force ever assembled, commanded by the sons of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, has encountered something on the North Sea that no longship crew has ever seen. A U.S. Navy carrier strike group, 1 aircraft carrier, 2 destroyers, 1 cruiser, and the FC-18 Super Hornets that are already airborne. The Vikings have never lost a raid. The U.S. Navy has never lost a carrier. This is going to be different from everything that came before it. The U.S. Navy carrier strike group operating in the North Sea in 865 AD consists of the USS Gerald R. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier 92 feet long, carrying 75 aircraft and a crew of 4,500. 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, 1 Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and 2 Los Angeles-class attack submarines operating submerged beneath the strike group. Total personnel, approximately 7,000 sailors and Marines. Total aircraft, 75, including 48 FC-18 Super Hornets, 6 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, 4 E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft, and 19 helicopters. The Great Heathen Army opposing them fields between 15,000 and 20. 0 Viking warriors, the largest Norse military force ever assembled, carried in approximately 500 longships across the North Sea toward the English coast. Each longship carries between 30 and 60 warriors. Each warrior carries a round wooden shield, a Danish axe or sword, a spear, and the psychological inheritance of 70 years of successful raiding across every coastline in Europe. The Viking commanders, Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and their brothers, have never encountered an enemy they could not defeat by appearing where they were not expected and hitting, harder than anything the defender had prepared for. They are about to encounter an enemy that knew they were coming before they left Norway. The E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft operating at 25,000 feet above the North Sea detects the Great Heathen Army's fleet at 0347 hours before dawn, 180 miles from the English coast. The radar return of 500 wooden longships on the North Sea is unmistakable. 500 separate surface contacts, moving in a loose formation at approximately 8 knots, heading southwest toward England. The carrier's Combat Information Center processes the contact data in 4 seconds. The duty officer calls the strike group commander. The strike group commander, a rear admiral with 28 years of naval service, looks at the radar picture for 11 seconds. He says, "How many contacts?" The duty officer says, "Between 480 and 520, sir." He says, "Speed and heading?" The duty officer says, 8 knots, bearing 235. Estimated landfall in 22 hours. The admiral says, "Get the air wing up. I want eyes on those contacts at first light." He pauses. He says, "And somebody tell me what's out here in 865 AD that fields 500 ships." His intelligence officer, who has been running historical database searches since the contacts appeared, says, "Sir, based on the date and location, it's the Great Heathen Army." The admiral says, "The Vikings." His intelligence officer says, "Yes, sir." The admiral looks at the radar picture again. He says, "Well, they picked the wrong ocean." The first FCA-18 Super Hornet to overfly the Viking fleet at dawn produces the most one-sided reconnaissance mission in naval history. The pilot, a lieutenant commander from VFA 102, descends to 500 feet above the fleet at 400 knots and makes one pass from north to south across the entire formation. What she sees in that single pass 500 longships in a loose formation covering approximately 12 square miles of ocean, each ship propelled by sail and oar, each carrying between 30 and 60 warriors visible on deck. Dragon prows, striped sails, shields mounted along the gunwales, the most feared naval force in the medieval world, exactly as the history books described it, 180 miles from the English coast at dawn in 865 AD. She pulls up, climbs back to altitude, and radios her report to the carrier. Then she adds one line that is not in the standard reconnaissance report format. She says, "Sir, they are absolutely beautiful." The carrier's Combat Information Center receives the report. The admiral reviews the imagery from the pilot's targeting pod. He looks at 500 Viking longships on the North Sea at sunrise and says nothing for 30 seconds. Then he says, "Beautiful or not, they're heading for a civilian coastline. What's our intercept option?" The carrier strike group moves to intercept at 0600 hours, positioning between the Viking fleet and the English coast at a distance of 80 miles from the nearest longship. The two destroyers take flanking positions 20 miles north and south of the carrier. The submarines move to within 5 miles of the Viking fleet's leading edge, submerged, undetectable. The Viking scouts, small, fast longships running 10 miles ahead of the main fleet, are the first to encounter the carrier strike group. 2 scout longships come over the horizon at 0645 and see the USS Gerald R dead ahead at 15 miles. What they see, a flat steel island 0.92 feet long and 250 feet wide, sitting on the ocean, with no sails, no oars, no visible means of propulsion, aircraft on its deck, and a radar mast that looks like no mast any Viking has ever seen. The 2 scout ships stop rowing. They stop completely. They sit on the ocean 15 miles from the carrier for 4 minutes without moving. Then they turn around and row back to the main fleet at maximum speed. The Viking commander receiving the scout report, Ivar the Boneless, the most tactically sophisticated Viking commander of his generation, listens to it without expression. Then he says, "How big?" The scout says, "Bigger than any island we have seen that moves." Ivar says, "Islands do not move." The scout says, "This one does." Ivar the Boneless earned his name and his reputation through tactical intelligence that was, by the standards of 9th century warfare, extraordinary. He planned the Great Heathen Army's invasion of England years in advance. He coordinated multiple commanders across a coalition force of thousands. He captured York, the second most important city in England, through strategic maneuver rather than direct assault. He is, in the Viking world, the equivalent of a military genius. He receives the scout report of the USS Gerald R and spends 20 minutes asking questions. How wide? How tall? Does it have weapons visible? How many men on its deck? What is it made of? The scouts answer everything they can. Ivar sits in the stern of his longship looking southwest toward the carrier's position over the horizon and thinks for 11 minutes. His brother Halfdan says, "Do we go around it?" Ivar says, "It will follow us. Whatever it is faster than we are." Halfdan says, "How do you know?" Ivar says, "Because it came from beyond the horizon, and it is already between us and the coast. Nothing that size moves that fast with oars. It uses something we don't understand." Halfdan says, "What do we do?" Ivar says, "We go toward it. You cannot understand what you don't approach. We go toward it and we learn what it is." Halfdan says, "And if it kills us," Ivar says, "then we learn that too." The Viking fleet advances toward the carrier strike group at 0900 hours. 500 longships moving in formation toward a carrier strike group is the most visually extraordinary naval confrontation in history. Dragon prows and striped sails advancing on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the North Sea at dawn in 865 AD. The FCA-18s maintain a combat air patrol at 10,000 feet above the fleet, visible to the Vikings as moving objects in the sky that are faster than any bird and louder than any thunder. The destroyers are visible on the horizon to the north and south. The carrier sits at the center. The Viking fleet closes to 10 miles before the admiral gives his first demonstration order. A single FA-18 descends from altitude and makes a low pass directly over the Viking fleet at 100 feet and 500 knots, the length of the entire formation in 8 seconds, the jet blast hitting the longship's sails like a horizontal storm, the noise at 100 feet, producing a sound pressure level that no Viking warrior has ever experienced, and that causes every longship within 200 meters of the flight path to lose steering control simultaneously as their crews react to the noise. The FCA-18 climbs back to altitude. The Viking fleet stops, all 500 ships. Complete stop. The admiral watches on the carrier's camera feed. He says, "That got their attention." Ivar the Boneless watches the FCA-18 pass over his fleet and does not flinch. His warriors around him react, dropping to the deck, grabbing the gunwales, covering their ears. Ivar watches the aircraft climb back to altitude and follows it with his eyes until it becomes a speck. Then he picks up his axe, not as a weapon but as a thinking tool, the way some men pick up a pen, and turns it over in his hands for 3 minutes. His fleet has stopped. His warriors are looking at him. He says, loudly enough for the men in the nearest ships to hear, "It is a weapon we don't have. Every enemy we have ever faced had weapons we had faced before, swords, spears, arrows, fire. This enemy has a weapon that moves through the air faster than an arrow and makes thunder." He pauses. He says, "But it is still a weapon, and every weapon has a range. Every weapon has a limit, and every enemy that has a weapon we don't understand has a weakness we haven't found yet." He looks at his brothers. He says, "We are not going to England today. We are going to find out what that thing is and what it cannot do. Then we decide." His fleet turns, not in retreat, in reconnaissance. Ivar the Boneless, who has never retreated in his life, has just invented strategic reconnaissance against a technologically superior enemy. He is going to spend the next 48 hours trying to find the carrier's weakness. He is not entirely wrong to try. The next 48 hours produce the strangest naval engagement in history. Ivar sends small groups of 3 to 5 longships probing the carrier's perimeter from different directions simultaneously, not to attack but to observe, to find the edges, to understand what the flying machines do and don't do, where the large ship goes and doesn't go, whether the steel islands beneath the water are real or rumor. The carrier's submarine crews, watching through their periscopes, observe Viking longships rowing directly overhead at 4 a.m., the crews leaning over the sides looking into the taper water, clearly aware that something is below them, unable to see it, unable to do anything about it. The submarine commander watching a Viking warrior stare directly at his periscope from 30 feet away, making eye contact through glass and 9. Centuries of technology, radios the carrier. He says, "Admiral, a Viking just looked directly at my scope." The admiral says, "Did he see it?" The submarine commander says, "He saw something. He's poking it with an oar." The admiral says, "Maintain position." The submarine commander says, "Yes, sir." He pauses. He says, "Sir, he is a very large man." On day 3, the admiral faces the same decision the Ranger Battalion commander faced on the Mongolian steppe, the targeting decision. The carrier's weapon systems can destroy the entire Viking fleet in approximately 4 minutes. 500 longships, 15,000 to 20,000 warriors, the entire Great Heathen Army, gone in 4 minutes with the carrier's available munitions. The admiral does not give that order. He gives a different one. He orders a single Seahawk helicopter to fly to Ivar's flagship, identified by the largest dragon prow and the most elaborate sail markings, and hover 50 feet above it, not firing, not threatening, just hovering, waiting. The helicopter crew watches Ivar the Boneless stand in the stern of his longship looking up at the helicopter for 6 minutes. He examines it. He walks around the deck looking at it from different angles. He reaches up toward it. It is too high to touch, and holds his hand up toward the rotor wash. He feels the wind it makes. Then he does something that the helicopter crew did not expect and that the admiral watching on the feed watches 3 times in replay afterward. He bows, not submission, not surrender. The Viking bow of acknowledgement between warriors of equal standing. He bows to the helicopter. The helicopter crew, unsure of the protocol, radios the carrier. The pilot says, "Admiral, he bowed at us. What do we do?" The admiral thinks for 8 seconds. Then he says, "Bow back." The negotiation between the U.S. Navy and the Great Heathen Army takes place on the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford. Ivar's condition, communicated through a chain of gestures and eventually a Norse interpreter found among the carrier's historians, is that any meeting happens on the enemy's ship. He wants to see it. The admiral agrees. Ivar the Boneless comes aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford with 6 of his warriors and spends 4 hours walking the carrier's flight deck, hangar deck, and combat information center, the last with considerable resistance from the carrier's security team that the admiral overrules. What Ivar sees in those 4 hours, the aircraft, the weapons systems, the radar, the nuclear propulsion plant, the 500 crew members operating the ship with the same disciplined precision that his own warriors operate their longships, produces in him the same reaction that the Spartan general had in the Museum of London and the Roman general had watching the Marines adapt under fire. Recognition, not of the technology, he has no framework for any of it. Recognition of the people, warriors, organized, disciplined, committed to their ship the way his warriors are committed to their longships. He says to the admiral through the interpreter chain, "Your ship is your longship, your crew is your crew. We are the same thing at different distances." The admiral, a man who has spent 28 years at sea, says yes, that is exactly right. The Great Heathen Army turns north on day 4 and sails back towards Scandinavia, not defeated, not destroyed, redirected, by the understanding that the coastline they were sailing toward is defended by something so far beyond their current capability that no amount of Viking tactical genius closes the gap in a single campaign. Ivar the Boneless, who redirected an army of 20 Zeusan warriors based on 3 days of reconnaissance against an enemy he had never seen, demonstrates in that decision the quality that made him the most dangerous Viking commander of his era. He knew when the raid was over. The greatest Viking raids in history succeed because they hit targets that couldn't defend themselves and withdrew before the defense could organize. The USS Gerald R. Ford is the first target in Viking history that was fully organized before the raid began, could see the fleet coming 180 miles away, and could respond faster than any longship could move. Ivar understood all of this in 3 days. He turned north. The Great Heathen Army went home. England, which was saved in 865 AD, not by Alfred the Great, but by a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier that had no business being in the North Sea, never knew what didn't happen to it. 3 videos into this series, Genghis Khan, the Roman Legion, the Vikings, a pattern is emerging that no military historian planned and no war game predicted. The U.S. military wins every direct engagement in every scenario by margins so large the word victory barely covers it. Apache helicopters against Mongol cavalry, Marine mortars against Roman testudo, FC-18 Super Hornets against Viking longships. The technology gap between the 21st century and the ancient world is so absolute that direct military comparison is almost meaningless. But the scenario keeps revealing something more interesting than the military outcome. Genghis Khan responded to Apache helicopters by inventing the concept of targeting enemy logistics. The Roman general responded to marine firepower by building a circumvallation in 6 hours. Ivar the Boneless responded to a carrier strike group by spending 3 days conducting strategic reconnaissance and then making the correct tactical decision to withdraw and regroup. 3 commanders from 3 different civilizations, separated by centuries, all responded to the most advanced military technology in human history the same way. Not with panic, not with suicidal courage, not with surrender, with intelligence, with adaptation, with the recognition that a battle you cannot win today is information you can use tomorrow. The U.S. military has better weapons than every army that ever existed. The greatest commanders in history had something that better weapons cannot replace. Subscribe, because next video we're sending the U.S. military somewhere the Vikings never dared to go, and the enemy has been waiting even longer.